Welcome back to another episode of Know Your Legacy. I'm your host, V, and today's guest is Larry Benet. Larry is the CEO of the Larry Benet Agency and also the creator of the Hsieh events, which stands for Speakers and Authors Networking Group. Over his lifetime, he's connected with some of the most influential, fascinating, and powerful people like Tony Robbins, Stephen Covey, Kevin Harrington, and the list just goes on and on. He's often referred to as one of the most influential and connected people on the planet. Larry, thank you so much for being here.
I appreciate it, V. Thank you, brother.
No problem, man. So I know we've only got a brief amount of time, so I want to jump straight into it. And I want to get into your backstory as well, but we'll do that on a separate episode. But just to jump in to create value for people, I know that one of your overarching principles is to be a servant leader. What does that mean, and why do you embody that?
Well, first of all, I just think it's a better approach to business and life, number one. Number two, if you meet someone for the first time, you have two choices. You can tell someone how cool a school you are, how great you are, but it's probably more impressive to say, how can I be of service to you? How can I help you? How can I be of value to you? And so for as long as I can remember, I've been doing those kind of things, and it just makes it a lot easier to connect with people and get in the good graces of others. I was literally at the NBA All-Star game recently, and the guy in front of me, we were both waiting for our tickets. I didn't know who he was, and we just started a conversation. One thing led to another. He said he's got two children that live in Hollywood. I live in Los Angeles. They work and they do movies and production stuff. And I said, well, how are they doing? Are they they're making a living? And he kind of rolled his eyes a little bit. And I said, listen, let me send your kids a book. And let me send them some videos that could be very helpful. And I said, because in Hollywood, a lot of it's all who you know. And he was very appreciative. And I said, listen, if I can ever invite them to something that can maybe help them, I'm happy to do so. And anyway, long story short, it turns out the guy is one of the co-owners of the Boston Celtics. It's a basketball team in the United States that's won a lot of NBA championships. Needless to say, he's a very influential individual. But I could have told him how cool I was, and here it was. I was just trying to help him and be of service. So that's why I do that, and just it's a better approach.
I love that. Yeah. So it's coming from the perspective of how can I help you? What can I do to add value to you? And, get into that mind frame of thinking about things from their perspective rather than what you want. And there's actually a good quote that I read the other day, which you've probably come across in your time of connecting, which is life gives to givers and takes from takers. If someone's starting from scratch, they've got absolutely no idea how to be a connector and what to do. They've got no relationships to build on. What happens then? Where do you start and how do you build something like you've built?
Well, I think first of all, you got to build one relationship at a time. There's multiple ways of doing it. There's the old fashioned way. You can go to events and go meet people and see how you find out what they need help with or what they what their business is about, et cetera. That's one approach. Other approaches are you're doing a podcast, you could go interview people, you could write a book. There's different ways, different approaches, but at the end of the day, I still think you have to create value for other people, and that's one of the most important things. And whether you do it via a podcast, whether a newsletter, whether going out the old-fashioned way, or just reaching out. I reach out every single day to new people on social media. There's a CEO of a fast-growing direct selling travel company that happens to be headquartered where I live in Los Angeles. We have mutual friends. We've met like one time for like a couple moments, but I reach out to them, and it's so anyone can do that. I think with the barriers in today's social media, you go reach them on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, all these different channels. And like I said, also going to live events is wonderful as well.
So what happens if someone is starting, just the average Joe, and they know they want to build a powerful network? You said to do it one relationship at a time, but let's say, for example, someone as influential as Tony Robbins, who's got massive following, he's probably got handlers, there's many people in between him and the person that wants to speak to him. How do you start? Can you give a story of like someone that you knew you wanted to touch base with, but it's like, you don't even know where to begin? How do you do it then?
So let's do this. we're talking if someone's brand new and just starting out. So let's put it this way. If you're trying to approach a Tony Robbins, if you're trying to approach someone who's incredibly influential, like a Gary Vaynerchuk, right? You better be bringing something to the table that they're interested in. Because if not, they don't have time for you. And they have handlers. And there's reasons why they got to where they're at. So I think often a big mistake is starting from where you're at and then all of a sudden trying to go to the very top, in 2.6 seconds. So at the end of the day, now, if you have something that is of strategic importance, of value to them, if you can help their charity or foundation, if you could bring them a guest for their podcast, if you can help them move their book, a lot of these guys have books. There's different ways. I'm just saying, at the end of the day, you got to find a hook. You got to find an angle. When I had no money, I helped Larry King. I helped President Clinton, Richard Branson, and others. I raised money for their charities. That doesn't mean I'm going to be buddy with President Clinton and Richard Branson, but that was a first step way in the door. So that, you got to start somewhere, and it all comes down to, if no one remembers anything other than on this one thing on this podcast, it is give value first, add value always. Give value first, add value always. And if you do that, you will have more success in business and in life, and you'll get whatever you want faster. I promise you. You just got to go implement that.
Before we get into the next question, could you give a quick example of that as well? Because I know you've done that many, many times, and then you call it connection currency, and then you've capitalized and cashed it in as well at the right time.
Absolutely. Let's take a high profile guy, something simple that didn't cost any money. So Tony Hsieh founded a company called Zappos. He sold Zappos, which is now probably a $6 or $7 billion company. He sold that to Jeff Bezos at Amazon. Tony wrote a book called Delivering Happiness. And a couple years ago, the Time magazine had a whole magazine on the science of happiness. So all I did is I sent him the magazine with a link saying, hey, I don't know if you saw this, but this whole magazine is about the science of happiness. I thought you could appreciate this and value it. So something like that is of value to a guy like him because he wrote a book about happiness, right? And so I'm doing this kind of stuff like all the time. Here's another example. Wolfgang Blitzer is a talk show on CNN. He's a host on CNN. And the other day I was at the same event with him. I went up to him. I complimented him. We spoke briefly. I found some common ground with him. I asked him about Larry King, the legendary talk show host. And then on the way out, I said, hey, do you ever speak or do you ever MC events? Because if you do, how would I follow up with you if I ever referred you business? Sent him a gig, a speaking opportunity. He actually gave me his card. So really, again, it comes down to figuring out. Sometimes it's an article. Sometimes, someone might be a high profile person and they misspelled something on their social media. It might just be saying, hey, I just want you spelled a couple things wrong, or basically there's a grammatical error on your website, or here's an article I thought you could benefit from. Oh, by the way, I heard you're really passionate about this specific kind of charity, and I saw this wonderful, and that you're tying it to something that they resonate with.
Yeah, I love that. So it's always looking at it from their perspective, whether it costs money or it doesn't. It has to be something that are coming from a place of generosity and kindness. I guess that's what it boils down to. Trying to. I met President Clinton years ago at a charity, like a fundraiser thing for him, and we really didn't have a whole lot of time to talk. It was more like a photo op, and literally, I asked him. Well, first, to backtrack. So before I met the president, I asked myself, who did I know that would know the president? So if I said something, there'd be some level of name recognition. And I said, we have a mutual friend in Ken Cragen. Ken Cragen created We Are the World, but Ken Cragen with Quincy Jones, the legendary music producer, produced the inaugurational ball, or one of, for President Clinton. And I said, President Clinton, would you like to come to the We Are the World live recording with Celine Dion, Barbara Streisand,
Lionel Richie, Michael Bublé, Justin Bieber, and all these great people. And he was like, oh, that's interesting. I had asked literally an hour before to Ken Cragen if I could invite him. Could I ask him? And then I said, hey, can I ask him if he wants to play sax with all these people? And Ken's like, I don't have the authority to do that. But the point is, he gave me his contact information after like literally 30, 40 seconds, told the Secret Service people to come on over. The reason I tell you that is here it is. That's the president or the former president of the United States, flanked by Secret Service, has never met me before, gave me his contact information to follow up. But the reason is there was something of value for him that he cared about.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I love that. And it applies to everyone, and you're showing it at being at the highest of levels. So, I mean, I've heard you say before, you've got 15,000 plus people on your phone. How do you keep track of so many people? Like, if you break it down for people in terms of how you're organizing that information, is it by country, by industry? What's going on there?
Yeah, I mean, so most people put a name and a number into their phone. But other than that, that's not so like, I'm in LA this week. I was just in San Diego. I was in Nashville, Tennessee the week before that. I was in Atlanta for the Super Bowl. I was in Charlotte, North Carolina for the NBA All-Star Weekend. I came back for the LA for the Oscars, and literally in my phone, for example, I have the word Super Bowl under certain people's contact information. So I am going down the list when I'm in Atlanta saying, hey, are you in town for the Super Bowl? Would you like to get together? Or, hey, I know you're going to be in town for the Super Bowl. Would you like to come as my guest to the Lee Steinberg Super Bowl party? Boom. Then when I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, I'm trying to figure out who do I know in Charlotte, North Carolina. Well, Jeffrey Gitomer, the very famous sales trainer, him and I hadn't talked in a while. He had spoken at one of my events. I've known him for a long time. He's written numerous best-selling books. He's written a book called Jeffrey Gitomer's Sales Manifesto. And I've written, he's written like 10 best-selling books. But anyway, I said, hey, I'm in Charlotte. Here's where I'm at. You want to come down and, meet up? And he's like, come over to my house when you're free. So him and I, reconnected, and it looks like him and I are going to collaborate on some projects together. But again, same thing. When I was in back in LA for the Grammys, I have things under the word Grammy or music or singer or this or that, or Los Angeles. And so then I can rapidly go through my phone or my CRM, and you got to tag things right. So the main reason most people don't do a good job of staying in touch with their network, it's not because they don't want to. Normally, they don't have the right process and systems and technology to do so. Let me ask you a question. Why do you think robbers rob banks?
For money.
It's where all the money is. Why do you think the top entrepreneurs, the top salespeople, top people in business development stay in touch and they build long-term relationships and they're adding value along the way? The biggest mistake someone can make is reaching out to someone with a big ask when they have no relationship capital, no connection currency in the piggy bank. And I'll give you a perfect example. I was able to get Super Bowl tickets, which are very difficult to get, because I had a long-term relationship with someone that has a relationship with the NFL. And my tickets literally came, 3 to 4 hours before game time. I got a block of 5 tickets, which is pretty impossible to pull the day of the game. But again, I leverage relationships, strategic connections, staying in touch, the things I'm talking about here. And as a matter of fact, him and I, that gentleman that helped me has he's run numerous professional sports teams. And him and I bonded over helping the homeless like 10 plus, 12 plus years ago, maybe 15 years ago.
Yeah. No, I love that, because it's an example of you being able to cash in at the last minute for something that's just like out of most people's reach. So just before we get into the last few questions, what's the most sort of exciting thing you're working on now, or the latest project that you're doing?
I have a lot of different things. Right now I want to finish my book. I want to, I'm going to probably launch either a coaching or another, like a live event, because a lot of people ask me how to do, how I do what I do. How do I get connected? How do I connect with influential people? How do I stay in touch? How do I manage how do I, manage 15,000 relationships and all these different things? And so I'm going to probably teach some of the things that I've learned over 30 years. I've failed more than most. I've made it and lost it more times than I can count. I've been selectively outsourced 4 times. That's a nice way of saying I've been fired. I've battled depression over the course of my business career on numerous occasions. Normally it had something to do when the business was going down, and I would compare myself to my successful peers and colleagues. And the one thing I know, if you lose everything, you could start over, because you know what? You have relationships, and they can get you back in the business right away. And making things happen. So
most definitely, yeah. And you're a live example of that, being able to leverage relationships when you need them to get yourself forward to wherever you're strategically trying to go. So I mean, just to wrap up with the final question, then, I mean, with all the crazy stuff that you've done and that you're going to be doing in the next few decades, I mean, what's the legacy that you want to leave behind in the end?
I think for me, my ability of connecting and influencing, ultimately the biggest benefactors of that will be me helping more entrepreneurs have more successful businesses. If I could help create a movement on teaching people by giving first and adding value and serving others and making a difference is a better approach to business and in life, I think that'll propel, millions of people. That would be a nice thing. And ultimately, I would love to help more of the homeless and more of the military vets get back on their feet. And the more influence I have, the more ability I can connect and bring people together to solve those kind of problems. So I think that will probably be my ultimate long-term legacy.
Bringing people together to make this world a better place. I love it. Yeah. So if people want to find out more about what you're doing and all the upcoming stuff, where's the best place for them to do it?
They can either go, they can download a free ebook at just Larry Benet, BENET.com/ebook. And we'll just give them the ebook on how to connect with anyone quickly and influence people. I'm on Facebook a lot. I'm on Instagram at Larry K BENET. I'm just starting on LinkedIn. So my goal is to be on all the different social channels where I provide valuable content, for free to help other people. So, and obviously our website's just thelarrybenet.com. So they can reach us there if they like, of course.
Most definitely. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom in such a small amount of time. Usually these interviews go on for about an hour, but we'll save that for another time to get into your story of all the things you learned there. But appreciate you taking the time and look forward to the next one.
I appreciate you for having me.